For this assignment, you are going to do what is called a variegated wash. So I started off by taping off one of my watercolor sheets of paper. I taped the center to divide it into two sections. So I'm actually playing this in double speed or maybe even triple speed just so that you can watch the video in a shorter time, but at the same time still hear my commentary, which I think is a little bit more important than to physically watch me paint this whole thing. And and so you just did washes, you did the flat wash, you also did the gradated wash. Now the variegated wash, very similar to the last ones. So for variegated, your goal is to do a wash, but you're going to transition into another color. And so here I'm adding my first color. You'll notice that it's wet. It's wet on wet. So keep that in mind. If you feel like it's not wet enough, add a little bit more water. Use your brush. When it comes to this pigment, you'll notice that what you're really doing is pushing around that little bead, that little drop of pigment and water mixed together so that it spreads out a little bit. So I added one color there. And if you are blending, you want to have these colors already out on your palette. So I actually have these, I had two variations of blues and I also have a green that I'm going to use. But for the first half, I'm just going to do variegated wash of just two colors. So now I'm getting my second color. I'm applying it there. I started off painting right over the area that I had left off. So you're almost painting right on top of each other. And when it comes to variegated, you want to have it blend. So you see me going back and forth a little bit. What helps is I try to go as light as I can when I'm touching the paper with my brush. I've seen other artists, they actually tilt their paper so that the water will run towards the other color, and you can try that too. But for me, I just like to use my brush. I'll make sure that there's almost no more pigment and water on it so that it's really just pushing everything. So that actually helps. It helps to be able to push around your pigment while it's still wet. So um, I like to try to wipe off some of the extra beads of water that will usually end up on the sides or the corner. Maybe I haven't mentioned this yet, but I'm actually working at a slight angle, and that's probably tough to do at home sometimes. You just have to put a book under water your watercolor board. So I'm working on the second side. Here I want to work with more than one color, so I'm actually going to change it up a little bit. So I'm still using the same blue that I used earlier, and I'm just going to start off with that color. You'll see that you can tell just from the way the water is traveling that my paper is pretty wet. So I'm adding the second color here, and again, you should always have the colors out in advance, already on your palette, already mixed if you are planning to mix colors. So when it comes to this variegated wash, you can see that I'm trying to paint over what I already painted, especially towards the area where I'm trying to transition. So from the way it looks right now, there's a very clear separation, and I don't really like that. I want it to blend even more, so I actually ended up going back with my brush and just I try to touch it up a little bit, try to blend in between the areas there, and this only really works when the water is still wet. So I'm adding more pigment. because I'm not really that satisfied with the way it's appearing. So what's cool about watercolor is that it's semi-forgiving. Most cases it is not. If you make a mistake, it's better to just use a new paper. But when it's still wet, especially if you're just blending, you can actually get away with a few mistakes here and there. Just kind of push paint over it, and it'll start to look a little bit more blended. So that's pretty much it for the variegated wash. Another short assignment. I know that this feels like work, but it's only here to make us a little bit better before we start working on projects.